She went quietly. That was the thing no one in the room could adequately explain afterward. Not to themselves, not to each other, not in the careful, abbreviated versions of the story that circulated through the 43rd floor in the weeks that followed. They had all been present. 12 people around a conference table, documents open, the specific productive tension of a meeting that was almost finished. She had been standing at the presentation screen with a laser pointer and a data set and the same quality of focused competence she brought to everything. And then she had not been standing anymore. No warning sound. No stumble, no grab for the table's edge. She had simply stopped. The way a light stops when the power goes, present, and then not. Seo Hyun-woo was on his feet before anyone else registered what had happened. Later, Park would say he had never seen the chairman move that fast. Han would say he had never seen the chairman move at all. That in 4 years he had never once seen him cross a room with urgency, and that the specific quality of speed with which he covered the distance between his chair and the presentation screen was something he filed in a private category and did not discuss. Yoon would say nothing, because Yoon was the one who saw what came after, and what came after was not the kind of thing you built a sentence around easily. He caught her at the floor. Both arms, one under her shoulders and one under her knees. The specific catch of a man whose body understood before his mind finished the instruction that she was not going to land safely on her own, and that this was not acceptable. He brought her down as close to gently as the physics of 2 bodies and a conference room allowed. He knelt on the floor beside her. He said her name once, low, not for the room, just for her. She did not respond. He checked her pulse with 2 fingers below her jaw. Present, steady, then, and then, because she was wearing a blazer that had twisted in the fall, and he needed to check her breathing and needed to loosen whatever was constricting, and his hands were already moving before the thought was complete. He pushed the sleeve back. He saw the needle mark. 1 breath, 2. The room had gone into the particular efficient crisis mode of people who have been trained to manage unexpected situations and are managing this one. Someone was on the phone with the building's medical team. Someone had cleared the space around her. Someone was speaking in the low, controlled register of coordinated professional response. Seo Hyun-woo was not in that room anymore. He was present in it physically, kneeling on the conference room floor with her arm in his hands and the needle mark inside her elbow, and the full weight of 11 years of knowing what it was like to carry something enormous and invisible and alone arriving in his chest like a door being opened from the inside. He said, "Clear the room." Nobody moved immediately, because they were in the middle of organized response, and nobody clears a room in the middle of organized response without a beat of processing. He said it again. They cleared the room. The 43rd floor of the CO Holdings building in Chicago's Loop was not the organization's operational center. That was elsewhere, distributed, managed with the specific architecture of a man who had learned from his predecessor's mistakes and had built redundancy and separation into everything he touched. The 43rd floor was the public face, the floor that housed the legitimate financial analysis division, the legal team, the compliance department, the executive offices that appeared in the annual report. It was the floor that the building's various visitors and auditors and regulators moved through without needing to see anything else. It was also the floor where Adaize Okonkwo had worked for 2 years and 3 months as a senior financial analyst, which meant she had worked there for long enough to know exactly what she was inside and to have developed, through that knowledge, the specific professional comportment of someone who had decided that knowing and proceeding were not mutually exclusive, and that her job was to do her job regardless. She was 29. She had a master's degree in financial economics from the University of Chicago that she had finished a semester late because of the 6 weeks she'd spent in a hospital at 24, which was the period she did not discuss, and which had left certain evidence on the inside of her left arm that she managed, in the way she managed most things. With clothing and precision and the specific discipline of a woman who had decided that what she had survived was hers to carry and not the world's to examine. She had been managing it for 5 years. The management had, in the last 6 weeks, become harder. Not because anything had changed in the fundamental situation, the chronic condition she treated, the maintenance medication, the specialist appointments she scheduled on Fridays so they fell outside the work week and left no gap in her professional availability, but because the medication had been adjusted. A new protocol. Her specialist had said the adjustment period would take 4 to 6 weeks, and that fatigue was expected, and that she should monitor and rest when she could. She had monitored. She had not rested adequately, because the project cycle for the third quarter analysis had not allowed for adequate rest, and she had made the calculation she always made when her professional requirements and her body's requirements came into conflict. She had asked her body to wait. Her body had, as of 10:47 am on a Thursday in November, stopped waiting. She had felt it coming for approximately 45 seconds before it arrived. A narrowing of peripheral vision, a quality of distance from her own voice as she was speaking, the specific warning system her body ran when it was approaching a threshold. She had in that 45 seconds done what she always did with such warnings. She had noted it, assessed her distance from the nearest exit and the nearest chair, determined that she could finish the sentence she was in the middle of and reach the chair without incident, and proceeded. She had been wrong about the chair. The building's physician arrived at 10:51. By then, Adaizi was conscious. She had come back in the elevator of being carried, in the specific confusion of waking somewhere that was not where you last were, and had understood the situation with the rapid assessment of someone whose body had been through versions of this before, and who had a practiced protocol for the aftermath. Her protocol did not include Seo Hyun-woo kneeling on the conference room floor beside her with an expression she had never seen on his face in 2 years and 3 months of working in his building. She had studied his face in the way you study the faces of people on whom things depend, professionally, without the layer of personal interest, because personal interest in a man like Seo Hyun-woo was a complication she had categorized as outside the scope of her current situation, and kept it there with the same discipline she applied to everything else. She had studied his face and learned it well enough to read its professional registers, the specific quality of attention he brought to a problem he found genuinely complex, the distinct absence of expression that meant he had made a decision, and the decision was final. The controlled acknowledgement that passed for enthusiasm in a man who had decided enthusiasm was a resource to be allocated carefully. She had not studied the expression he was wearing now, because she had not known it existed. She said, because the silence was making her medical situation feel more significant than she was prepared for it to feel in a conference room, I'm fine. He said, you fainted. I know, I was there. She attempted to sit up. He did not prevent her. He also did not move away. It's a known side effect of a medication adjustment. It's being managed. It won't. She stopped. He was looking at her arm, not with the expression of a man who had identified something alarming, with the expression of a man who had identified something he recognized. She pulled her sleeve down. He let her. The room is clear, she said. She had registered this, somewhere in the return to consciousness, the absence of the 12 people who had been in the room. You cleared the room. Yes, you didn't need to do that. I know. She looked at him. He was still kneeling. He had not stood, had not reset to the professional configuration, had not performed the return to normality that most people in his position would have performed as quickly as possible when an unexpected vulnerability had occurred in a meeting room. He was exactly where he had been, as if moving away from this required a decision he had not yet made. She said, "It's a chronic condition. I've had it for 5 years. I manage it." Today was a management failure of a specific and temporary kind, and it will not recur in this context. And I understand if you need to advise. She stopped. He said her name the way she had not expected him to say it, which was the way a person says a name they have been carrying with some care and have only now found the right occasion to set down. He said, "I'm not asking you to explain yourself." She looked at him. "I'm asking," he said, "if you've eaten today." The question was so specific and so ordinary and so entirely not the question she had been bracing for that she took a full 2 seconds to process it. She said, "No." "Yesterday?" She thought about it. Adequately, he stood, extended his hand. She looked at it for a moment. The hand, the extension of it, the specific intentionality of the gesture from a man who was not given to unnecessary gestures. And then she took it, because she was on the floor of a conference room and her legs were working at approximately 70% and the available options were limited. He helped her to a chair. Not the chair at the presentation end of the table, the chair nearest the window, which was the one that had a view of the lake and which she had always, in 2 years of attending meetings in this room, thought of privately as the chair she would choose if she were ever allowed to simply sit in it, rather than perform in front of it. She sat in the chair by the window. He went to the phone on the credenza, said 3 words to whoever answered, and came back. He sat in the chair beside her. Not at the head of the table, not behind the configuration of authority the room was built to support. The chair next to hers. 3 feet away, with the lake behind them both and the November light on the water doing its gray, flat work, the way November light does in Chicago when it has decided that warmth is someone else's problem. Take a breath, my still water dreamers, and quietly faithful. This is where we live, in the stories that ask the most of everyone in them. If you're new here, you're home, subscribe, like, and drop your city below. I want that map. I want to see every place this story found someone tonight. Lights low. Back in. Food arrived in 14 minutes, not from the building's kitchen, from somewhere else, something that had been ordered rather than assembled from whatever the 43rd floor's pantry held. Proper food. The specific thing her body needed after an episode like this, which she had been managing for 5 years, and which someone had clearly, in the 14 minutes since she sat down, looked up. She looked at the tray. She looked at him. He said, "My assistant has access to your employee medical profile. I asked her to check the dietary requirements associated with your condition." He paused. "You can tell me if that was an overstep." She was quiet for a moment. In 5 years, she had not had a single person in a professional context look up what she needed, rather than asking her to manage herself around the context. She had not known to want that. She had been managing so long that the managing had become the baseline, and the baseline had become invisible. And what was invisible had stopped being something she noticed the absence of. She noticed it now. She said, "It wasn't an overstep." She ate. He sat with the specific quality of presence he had been demonstrating since the floor. Not watching her. Not managing the situation. Not performing the executive concern that would have allowed both of them to return to the professional configuration quickly and cleanly. Simply present. In the chair, with the lake behind them, and the cleared conference room around them, and whatever this was taking up the space between them, with the specific weight of things that have been in a room longer than anyone has acknowledged. When she had eaten enough to feel her own edges again, she said, "The needle mark." Yes, you recognized it. He was quiet for a moment. Not the pause of a man deciding whether to answer, but the pause of a man deciding how to answer, the distinction she had learned to read in 2 years of working close to him. "My mother," he said. "She waited. She was diagnosed when I was 19. She managed it for 11 years. She was very private about it. She had grown up in a time and a context where illness was something you managed inside the house, not something you let out into the world, and she was very good at the managing." He looked at the lake. The needle mark was the one thing she couldn't fully manage. It was always there. And she always covered it, and I always saw it, and I always let her know I had seen it by not saying anything, because that was what she wanted, and because I was 23 and 25 and 28 and I did not know yet that seeing and not saying was a specific kind of leaving someone alone with something. She was very still. "She died when I was 30, he said. "The year I took over the organization, I have spent 7 years thinking about what I knew and what I said and the distance between those two things." He paused. "I looked at your arm, and I knew, and I cleared the room, and I did not want the distance again." She held this. Held it the way you hold something that has arrived in exactly the shape of a space you didn't know was there, not filling it, exactly, but fitting it, landing in it with the precision of something that was made for that specific place. She said, "She sounds remarkable." She was, he said. She was also alone with it more than she needed to be. More than I understood at the time. He looked at her. "I understand it now." She said, "I don't want your sympathy. I know." He held her gaze. "I'm not offering it." She looked at him. "Sympathy is what I give from a distance," he said. "I'm sitting 3 feet away from you. That's not sympathy." She was quiet for a long moment. The lake, the November light, the chair she had always privately wanted to sit in and had now sat in because she had fainted in a meeting and been carried here by a man who recognized a needle mark and cleared her room and ordered food and had just told her something he had never, she was certain, told anyone in this building. "The condition is manageable," she said. "Properly managed. It doesn't affect my work. I know that. The last 6 weeks have been an adjustment period. The specialist said 4 to 6 weeks. I'm at week 5. 1 more week." "Approximately," she paused. "I should have told HR. I know. I didn't because," she stopped. "Because you were not certain what you would lose by telling them." She looked at him. "You've been excellent for 2 years and 3 months, he said. "You understand the building and what it requires. You understood it faster than anyone we've brought in at your level. I have read every analysis you've produced, and I have not once found a thing I would change." He held her gaze. "I know that none of that protects you from the specific mathematics of a workplace, deciding that managing your condition is more expensive than managing without you. I know that because I have seen it happen. I know that you know it too, and that you made the calculation and decided that managing everything yourself was the rational response to the available options." She said nothing. "You were right," he said. "It was the rational response to the available options." He paused. "The options are different now." She looked at him carefully, at the man who had been precise and measured and professionally excellent for 2 years and 3 months, and who had, in the 40 minutes since she hit the floor, removed every layer of the professional configuration and was simply sitting 3 feet from her in a chair, telling her the truth about his mother and the distance between seeing and saying, and telling her the options were different now with the specific directness of a man who did not make statements he could not substantiate. She said, You cleared 12 people out of a room. Yes, in the middle of a third-quarter review. The review will keep. They all saw. Yes, he was steady. I know what they saw. I'm not concerned about what they saw. She understood what this meant. She understood it the way she understood most things, completely, with the full weight of the implication, without the softening layer that might have made it easier to hold. He had made, in clearing that room, a statement about what mattered to him in front of 12 people who worked for him and who would read it exactly as it was. He had not miscalculated this. He had decided. She said, "That was not a small thing to do." "No," he said. "It wasn't. You've known me for 2 years and 3 months. I've been paying attention for 2 years and 3 months," he said. "That's not the same as knowing. But it's the beginning of it, if you're willing." She held his gaze. She thought about 5 years of managing, of the specific discipline of containing something enormous inside a professional container, and asking the container to hold, and asking it again, and trusting it to hold, because the alternative, the world seeing what was inside it, had felt like a cost she could not afford. She thought about what it had taken to build that discipline, and what it had cost her in different currencies, and whether the cost had been worth the protection. She thought. He looked at the mark and cleared the room. He didn't ask her to explain it in front of 12 people. He didn't let the room reconfigure itself around her vulnerability. He moved the room. She thought, "That is a specific kind of seeing." She said, "The analysis for the third-quarter review." He waited. "I'll have it completed by end of day," she said. "The interruption this morning doesn't change the timeline. It changes today's timeline," he said. "End of week is acceptable." She looked at him. "I said end of day." Something moved through his face. She had not seen it before. Or rather, she had seen it exactly once before, 38 minutes ago, when he was kneeling on the conference room floor with the specific expression of a man who has just understood something he was not expecting to understand. It was that expression at a lower register, the version of it that existed when the surprise was not crisis, but something quieter, something that arrived like the difference between a door slamming and a door opening slowly. He said, "End of day." She said, "Thank you. For the food." "You're welcome." She said, "And for the floor." He held her gaze. "You're welcome for that too." She stood. Her legs were at full capacity now, the food and the time having done what they were supposed to do. She straightened her blazer with the practiced movement of someone restoring the professional container, and she picked up the laser pointer she had been holding when she went down. Someone had placed it on the table. She didn't know who. And she stood in the November light by the window with the lake behind her and looked at him in the chair. She said, "The options being different. What does that mean specifically?" He looked up at her. "I need you to be specific," she said. "I don't operate well with implication. I prefer to know what I'm being offered so that I can make an informed decision about it." He stood. He was taller than the chair had made him, taller than she forgot, between the times she was in close proximity to him, because he did not use his height as a declaration the way some men did. He was simply that height as a fact of himself, not a performance. He said, "It means that your medical situation is known to me and is not a variable in any decision I will make about your work or your position. It means that the adjustment period you have 1 more week of will be navigated with whatever accommodation you need without documentation or disclosure to anyone other than me. It means that what I said about 2 years and 3 months of excellent work was not a preamble to a condition. It was a statement of record." She absorbed this. "And beyond the professional scope," she said. He held her gaze. "Beyond it," he said, "I am sitting 3 feet from you instead of behind the table. I cleared 12 people so that you had space instead of an audience. I told you about my mother." He paused. "I don't tell people about my mother." She was quiet. "That is what I can offer you for now," he said. "Honesty about what I see and what I'm willing to do with it. I won't offer you more than I can substantiate." She looked at him for a long moment. At the face that had been learning to be private in front of her for the last 40 minutes, that had told her the truth about the distance between seeing and saying and what it had cost him, that was currently making no attempt to resume the professional configuration, because he had decided, apparently, that the professional configuration was not the most important thing in the room. She said, "I am going to finish the third quarter analysis." "Yes," he said. "And then I am going to go to my appointment with my specialist on Friday." "Yes, and when the adjustment period is over, I'm going to be back to the level of function that you are accustomed to, and the last 6 weeks will be medically behind us. I have no doubt of that." And at some point after all of that, she said, "I would like to have a conversation that does not take place in a conference room, where I can be specific about what I think about what you told me about your mother, and about what it means that you cleared 12 people instead of let the room decide for itself, and about what I think I might be willing to do with the fact that I have been paying attention for 2 years and 3 months as well." She held his gaze. "Not today, when I have all of my resources available, because that conversation deserves them." He held her gaze for a long moment. He said, "Name the day." She said, "I'll let you know when I'm past week 6. I'll be available," he said. She nodded once, moved toward the conference room door, then stopped, turned back. She had been going to say something professional, something that closed the conversation cleanly and allowed both of them to return to the workday through an exit that looked like the entrance they had come in through. She said instead, she would be proud of you for not leaving someone alone with something. Your mother. He was still. "That's not sympathy," she said. "That's just true." She opened the conference room door. The 43rd floor was quiet. The 12 people elsewhere, the building doing the work buildings do when they are asked to simply continue. She walked back to her office with the laser pointer in her hand and the blazer straight, and the specific quality of forward movement that belonged to her. Behind her, in the conference room, Seo Hyun-woo stood by the chair she had sat in and looked at the lake and understood, in the full and unmanaged way that understanding arrives when you have stopped using architecture to direct it, that the world he had built, precise, controlled, every variable accounted for, had just acquired something it had not had before. A place where he was allowed to have been 23 and 25 and 28 and learned something too late and said so out loud. He had not known he needed that place. He stood there for a long time. Then he went back to work.